Talk therapy by itself is ineffective for doing sexual trauma work. I know TFCBT is big as far as helping the child to form the narrative. Okay, that can be useful. Sometimes survivors want to tell their story and be able to articulate it, but it does not touch the deeper parts of our brain that have been traumatically wounded and struggle to regulate. Okay? My opinion, my experience. This is why if someone is activated and you say, calm down, it is like saying, stop your heart from beating. Stop it. It's not going to work. Okay? So some basic nervous system information. The sympathetic half of our nervous system says fight or flight. And it says a few more things we're going to get into in a few more slides. Okay? The parasympathetic says rest and digest. What happens when we're traumatized? So normally it's self-regulating, right? This nice even flow back and forth. We almost get into a car accident and okay. We're going to sit. We're going to start to calm down kind of naturally. What happens when we're sexually traumatized is those two halves of our brain are like, whoa! Can't find that regulation. Can't find that balance and that flow. We're either super overactivated in a manic anxiety state, or we're super underactivated in a depressive freeze state. Okay? Again, my opinion, most common misdiagnosis is bipolar. Okay? Bipolar is an easy way to describe the ups and the downs of having experienced trauma. And it is also the most easily billable diagnosis for health insurance companies. Coincidence? I don't know. So, now we're going to talk about the 5 F's. Y'all have probably heard of a few of them, and hopefully there are a few here you have not heard of, okay? And the way that we look at this is we have our trauma stress response in the moment. But then, because of our nervous system deregulation, that trauma response stretches out into our life experience. Okay? So say our natural instinct is the fight response. Our survivor was able to fight back at some point and maybe even fight off perpetrator. Okay? This person is naturally geared for anger issues, using intimidation, using power and control in relationships, long term. Make sense? Okay. Flight response. Get away, get away, get away, get away. I'm not safe, I'm not safe. Long term, anxiety, panic, rigidity, perfectionism. Freeze response. Now this, I like to draw a parallel to a possum playing dead. But it's not just relaxed. I don't know if you've ever experienced the kind of numbness that goes with shock. Whole body shuts down. That's an overfunctioning of the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay? So freeze response, that deadness of shock, long term looks like depression, dissociation, withdrawal, and escapism. Okay? Super low. The fawn response. A guy named Pete Walker out on the West Coast developed a diagnosis called complex PTSD to describe folks who it wasn't necessarily a single incident, but maybe lots of stuff over time and the things that they experience. And one of the things that he recognized, he called the fawn response. This is a Stockholm syndrome. This is we're being traumatized or perpetrated against. Our only way to psychologically survive is to become of service to the perpetrator, to fawn over the perpetrator, to one down ourselves and put the perpetrator up on a pedestal of sorts. Okay? Long term, this looks like codependence, merging, straight up servitude, a lot of trouble with boundaries in relationships. Make sense? Okay. Last one is the fiend response. I picked this one up from a local therapist named Eric Belsterling, and I have yet to ask him where he got it. But I also see this, especially in male survivors. When we're young, before we are really appropriately ready to have sexual experiences, before our nervous system is developed enough to kind of handle that stimulation, sexual experiences can be really overstimulating and flooding. Okay? Then, afterwards, this feels like normal, and a drop feels dangerous. So we go out seeking stimulation, drugs, video games, compulsive sex, gambling. Okay? I see a lot of this in male clients because it is more supported and encouraged for guys to be behaving in these ways, unfortunately. So that's the 5 F's. So this one I especially see in sexual trauma. I don't know how much it occurs in other types of trauma. But when we're stimulated sexually too early, before puberty, or we're not even ready for those sexual relationships, it jacks up our nervous system. It's too stimulating, okay? Then that becomes a new normal. That's what feels normal to us. And so we go out seeking those high-risk experiences to feel normal because slowing down feels scary and like the abyss yawning in front of us. So just to throw a little bit more of my opinion out here, we can take almost any diagnosis from the DSM to these 5 trauma responses. All right, I'll do a few and then we'll kind of have a little game and throw a few out. All right. Conduct disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, codependent disorder, substance use and abuse, borderline personality disorder. Yep. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Sometimes it's a combination. Bipolar might look like flight and freeze or fiend and freeze. Who's got another diagnosis they just want to throw out? We'll see if we can find it. Absolutely. So yeah, schizoaffective is that way shut down withdrawal. Great, thank you. ADD, yes. I think so much ADD is actually childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. Yep. Yeah. The fight or flight or the fiend. Yep. Attachment disorders. Yeah. Either this, the fawn, for folks who are just, or freeze in the withdrawal. Or what was somebody else say?
I'm thinking fawn borderline would be, of course, all of them, but a lot of the fawn.
Yeah, a lot of trouble with boundaries with borderline personality disorder. A lot of trouble with it. I mean, when we get in a room with someone, if we take health insurance, we talk to them for 45 minutes, we've maybe read the intake form, and then we diagnose them for the rest of their lives. I don't take insurance for that very reason. So part of it can be missing it on the intake, but also, as we saw, a lot of people don't report it or don't identify themselves as having been sexually abused. It doesn't even register. I've got folks who come and they say, like, this was kind of weird and I never really thought about it, but I was talking to my partner and they said, you should talk to someone. And I'm like, yeah, that's sexual abuse. It is. I'm sorry. This is what happened to you. So I think a big piece of it too is folks just don't know. They just don't know. Maybe even that there was anything wrong with what happened to them. True. Yeah. The trauma field is relatively newly emerging over the last couple decades and just making its way in through the ACEs studies. So yeah, let's spread the light of trauma awareness. I'm glad that y'all are here today. It can be hard to stare in the face the trauma that our clients have experienced. And so perhaps there's a tendency to avoid that as well. On my intake form, it says, do you have history of any kind of physical abuse, unwanted or abusive sexual experiences? I find that's the most general way to frame it, unwanted or abusive sexual experiences, because it can include that kind of weird thing, that the teacher did. Neglect and emotional abuse. So just asking, if y'all have intake forms and you're not asking about sexual trauma, please, if you can, just add it to the question. Add it to the questions that you ask. And I like the point you made. Asking about it doesn't set off a bomb in the room. Yes, talk therapy alone won't address it, but being able to talk about it starts to help to get all the parts of the brain involved. Like when we can form a narrative about it, then our front, mid, and hind brain can start to act in coordination. So it is important. Thank you. Any other thoughts on the 5 F's? Any questions about them before we keep moving? All right. Yeah, appreciate all the feedback today. So, main challenges for sexual trauma survivors: emotional dysregulation, shame, which is a huge piece of emotional dysregulation, and boundaries. And we address them with this basic list of approaches on the other side. And now we're going to start to get into some doing stuff, all right? So y'all have the opportunity to do some stuff today, and instead of sitting here and just listening to me drone on all afternoon. Okay. Breathing. Foundation of trauma response and of emotional regulation. It's working with that reptilian brain and the midbrain, okay? So we're going to do a couple exercises here. We'll start just with the out-breath, okay? So when we focus on out-breath, and I'll show you all how to do it and invite you to practice, we are activating the parasympathetic nervous system, okay? So it looks like this. If you take a normal breath in through the nose, and then do that 3 or 4 times. Nice, normal, slow breath in. 2 more. And what do you notice? Calmer, lighter. What else? Stomach relaxed. Little nummy, little tingly. Yep. So with the out breath, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. This is for folks who are really activated, really intense. If you can get them to just do that out breath. I mean, y'all started to feel a little something just with 4 of them. Folks also report feeling heavier, feeling a little lightheaded. That's the parasympathetic nervous system kicking in. If we sat here and we went like they do in some Kundalini yoga, trying to raise the energy, then we activate the sympathetic nervous system. So I don't have any experience with this, but if you're feeling really logy and kind of in the morning, try a few in-breaths like that. See what happens. See if you can get yourself going. Any questions about out-breath? Pretty simple? Great. My goal is for y'all to walk out with a whole bunch of really simple, easy techniques. There's some a little more involved, but just to walk out with a bunch of tools for healing sexual trauma. All right. So this next one is a body exercise, but we're going to do it anyway because I do it without breath, and I want y'all to have the experience of both. Let's see. I will do it standing, and you're going to need just a little arm and leg room. This is called the pretzel, okay? It's not as complicated as it sounds. So if you're willing to try, just put your arms and legs out in front of you. Legs can rest on the floor. It's okay. All right. If you are right dominant, cross right leg over left at the ankle or at the knee. Okay. It's easier sitting down, yeah. Turn your palms down and out to the sides. Cross dominant If you're right dominant, if you're left, cross left. Clasp your fingers just at the tips. I find a little easier because then we go in and up like this. Hopefully I'm not muffling the microphone too much. And just take a few nice deep breaths in and out. Notice that warmth and pressure of your hands and arms against your chest. Kind of like giving yourself a hug. And if you'd like to try, you can do a couple out breaths with the pretzel. Just relax as much as you can. It's okay to rest your feet on the floor. If this is too intense on the wrists, you can let go and just kind of butterfly hug yourself. Yeah, it gives that, it's like giving yourself a hug, kind of just all squeezed in, nice and comforting. There are a few clients I've had who are uncomfortable with the pretzel. It feels too binding, too confining. So that's okay. We've got more other techniques, you know. Is a technique workable for the client? That's what's most important. Is this workable? So my supervisor, my former supervisor, Linda Harrison, who also teaches here and is super amazing, she swears the pretzel and out breath will stop a panic attack in its tracks. Boom. Yep. Lots of my clients use the pretzel. They wake up in the morning, do pretzel in bed, you know, just to kind of like snuggle in and get themselves set right. Some of them do the pretzel at night when they're trying to fall asleep and their mind is racing and their body's activated. I've got a client who goes in the bathroom stall at work, sits on the toilet, does the pretzel just to stay regulated at work. Okay, you can do it pretty much anywhere, anytime. Wouldn't recommend trying to do it at a red light, you know, the pedals and stuff. But you could. You could do it in your car. Sometimes clients will go out after therapy and do it in the car, you know, if we've ended on a high, intense note. All right, any questions about the pretzel? So just to repeat, it's the arms and legs out, turn palms down and out to the sides. That's the hardest part to remember. Then cross and in. Okay? Movement breaths, it's what I was doing with y'all, kind of conducting. Sometimes when clients are so escalated and they can't sit and they're not going to do the pretzel, if they're super intense, in a super intense place, I'll ask them to stand up and we'll just breathe together. And I'll try to slow their breathing down a little bit by moving my arms slower and slower. So that can be good too for folks who are just too activated to sit and try a breathing exercise. So that's what movement breaths is. I don't think this is in the PowerPoint, but I think I'm going to put it in. I haven't done any quantitative research on this yet, but I can say anecdotally that every single client who comes in my office and says that they suffer from anxiety and drinks coffee or uses caffeine, if they're willing to go to decaf or cut it out for 1 week or 2 weeks, they see a major drop in their anxiety. Every single one. I have not had one client come back and say, I quit coffee and I didn't feel any less anxious.